Welcome to Jordan Pierce Stories. Today, we're diving into an inspiring tale where tears, laughter, and love intertwine to create an unforgettable journey. This is the story of a single mum who was mocked and humiliated during an important meeting. Her brilliant idea dismissed without a second thought. Yet, in that painful moment, an unexpected path opened. A powerful investor not only recognized the billion-dollar potential of her idea, but also discovered a genuine heart he couldn't ignore. Across 8 chapters, we'll follow this woman's extraordinary transformation. From humiliation to triumph, from loneliness to an unexpected and profound love. If you want to know how a single mum turned tears into strength, scorn into glory, and found love in the ruthless world of business, stay with us until the very end. This story will surprise you, move you, and keep you hooked from start to finish. And don't forget to hit subscribe to Jordan Pierce Stories so you never miss another dramatic and inspiring story like this. The city was still half asleep, bathed in the pale glow of dawn, but the small apartment of Emily, a single mum in her early 30s, was already wide awake. While her alarm blared and her 7-year-old son Ben clung to his blanket like a lazy caterpillar, Emily leapt out of bed. Her hair was a mess, but her eyes burned with determination. Today was no ordinary day. Today was her chance to pitch her idea to a room full of powerful investors, people who could turn her dream into reality, or crush it with a single smug laugh. "Ben, wake up, honey. Mommy doesn't want to be late for her comedy show," she teased while shaking him. Half asleep, Ben muttered, "If you make a fool of yourself, I'll be your #1 fan." His innocent words made Emily chuckle before she rushed him through breakfast and clothes. Inside, the mantra repeated itself. "I can't fail. Not this time." Emily had never been good at faking anything. People said her eyes always smiled, but those same eyes carried the weight of sleepless nights and triple shifts. This idea wasn't just a business plan. It was her one ticket out of overdue bills, endless sacrifices, and hope scribbled on the margins of paper. The bus ride was a battlefield of smells, cheap perfume, burnt coffee, and sweaty impatience. Clutching her worn-out leather briefcase, filled with papers she had revised until the edges tore, Emily rehearsed silently. "They might laugh. Let them. I'll speak until they can't ignore me." When she finally entered the gleaming skyscraper, her cheap heels echoed like tiny hammers on marble floors. Rolex watches flashed on the wrists of executives rushing past, while her palms grew clammy around the old briefcase. But instead of shrinking, she straightened her back and whispered to herself, "Pretend you're the heroine in a movie. They're all waiting for your plot twist." The conference room door opened. Cold eyes, perfect ties, laptops polished to mirror shine. Emily walked in, feeling like prey stepping into a den of wolves. Yet her gaze didn't falter, or at least she forced it not to. And in that moment, a spark of defiance ignited. Either she would make them listen, or she'd be laughed out of the room, tossed aside. A punchline in someone else's office gossip. The air in the conference room was so thick that Emily felt as if every breath cost her a coin. Rows of middle-aged men in tailored suits stared at her with icy eyes. Some didn't even bother to hide their smirks, as though they'd seen $100 billion dreams like hers, all ending up in the trash. "Good morning. I'm Emily Parker," she began, her voice shaky at first but gaining strength. It wasn't polished or theatrical, but raw. So raw that it demanded attention. Yet just as she clicked to her first slide, a voice coughed and muttered, "Here we go again. Another single mum with a startup fantasy." The room chuckled. Not loudly, but sharp enough to slice through her chest. Instead of panicking, Emily narrowed her eyes and shot back with a smile. "Yes, that's right. But remember, Thomas Edison was also called a dreamer. The only difference is I don't plan to invent the light bulb. I plan to light up this entire market." The room paused. Brows lifted. Some frowned. Others leaned in, curious. Emily knew she had bought herself a few precious seconds of attention. She launched into her pitch. A platform that connected small shops with customers through user-friendly technology, giving the little guys a fighting chance against the giants. She spoke from her own experience, shopping at stores on the brink of collapse, unable to keep up with the tech-driven world. But then, from the end of the table, a deep, mocking voice cut through. "Sounds nice, but if it were that easy, we would have done it already. Do you really think with that shabby briefcase you can convince us?" Another round of laughter. The sound felt like knives. Emily swallowed hard, straightened her spine, and smiled, a smile equal parts proud and bitter. Maybe this briefcase isn't as shiny as your watch, but inside it are 6 months of sleepless nights, hundreds of hours of research, and a belief no amount of money can buy. If you call that a joke, then I must be the best performer you've ever seen. Silence, so sharp she could hear her heartbeat. And then, from the corner of the room, a man with silver hair and a simpler suit than the rest tilted his head, lips curling ever so slightly, as if he had just discovered an unpolished gem. Emily didn't know it yet, but that was the moment everything began to change. The room was still cloaked in heavy silence. Eyes scrutinized her. Papers shuffled deliberately to stretch out her discomfort. Emily took a deep breath and thought, "This isn't the time to crumble. If I stop now, they'll remember me as a quitter. But if I keep going, at least they'll remember me as someone who dared." Her voice grew sharper, steadier. Emily turned their mockery into her weapon. She spoke of other single mothers, women who would never even get a chance to stand in this room. Yet they were the ones who needed her product most. If you think this idea is a joke, then I promise you, millions of people out there are ready to buy tickets for the show. Some faces shifted, not because they were convinced, but because Emily had dared to challenge them openly. To a few, that defiance felt like an insult. The man who mocked her briefcase sneered, "Oh, listen to that. She's a motivational speaker now." Laughter echoed again, sharp and bitter. Emily bit her lip, but instead of retreating, she stepped closer to the projector screen. Her voice carried through the room. "I'm not here to be your entertainment. I'm not here for pity. I'm here to find an investor brave enough to see the real value. Not just in the numbers, but in the person standing right in front of you. If that's too much to ask, then maybe I knocked on the wrong door." The words struck like lightning. Some shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to be angry or intrigued. In the corner, the silver-haired man who had been silent finally spoke. His voice was calm, deep, not mocking, but curious. "You mentioned 6 months of research and hundreds of sleepless hours. I want to know, how did you manage to survive all that, raising a child and building this idea at the same time?" Emily froze. The question wasn't an attack. It was a hand reaching out through the storm. Her eyes glimmered with gratitude, though she held it back. She smiled and replied steadily, "With love for my son, and with the certainty that if I don't try, he'll grow up in a world where every door is locked against people like us." The room fell silent once more, but this time it wasn't scorn. It was the heavy silence of people forced to think, and the first moment a heart among them began to stir. The air in the boardroom was like a wire stretched to its breaking point. Emily no longer stood there as just a fumbling single mum out of her depth. She looked like a warrior daring to defy an army in suits. Some investors scribbled half-hearted notes. Others shifted impatiently, her persistence grating against their oversized egos. But only one man, the silver-haired investor with the piercing eyes, watched her closely. His gaze wasn't pity. It was the look of someone who had just spotted gold in the rubble of battle. Emily took a deep breath and finished her pitch with conviction. "Maybe today you won't believe me. Maybe you'll laugh and dismiss me, just like everyone else has. But I promise you, one day, you'll remember this moment, when a single mom stood here and delivered an idea no one else dared to touch. I will turn this mockery into fuel, and I won't stop." Silence fell. Then the whispers returned. Delusional. Unrealistic. Papers shuffled as some gathered their things, already uninterested. Cold dread crept up her spine. She knew she had probably lost her chance. But just as she turned to leave, a deep, steady voice broke through. "Wait." Emily froze. It was the silver-haired man. He set his pen down, eyes meeting hers, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "You're right about one thing. Sometimes we laugh because we're too afraid to believe that something extraordinary could come from somewhere ordinary. I'd like to hear more about your idea. Not here, surrounded by minds already set on rejection, but somewhere else. Would you be willing to meet privately to discuss it further?" Emily stood stunned. Her heart pounded, not only because a spark of opportunity had appeared, but because of the way he looked at her, not as a failure, but as a woman of worth. She nodded, a smile trembling yet proud. "I'd be willing." And as the boardroom doors closed behind her, Emily had no idea that this miserable morning would mark the beginning of an entirely new chapter in her life, where business ambition, and love would soon collide. The hallway of the skyscraper felt cold and hollow. Emily walked as if her cheap heels were draining the strength from her legs. Each step echoed like a heavy heartbeat, carrying the weight of humiliation. Her heart bore a fresh wound, yet strangely, within it flickered a fragile spark of hope. The words "wait" from the silver-haired man replayed in her mind, pulling her back from the edge of despair. Not everyone in that room had dismissed her. At least one man had truly seen her, and that alone made her stride lighter, though her knees still trembled. Inside the elevator, Emily leaned against the cold steel wall, exhaling shakily. A few office workers came and went, sneaking curious glances. She knew the gossip. The single mum laughed out of the meeting. Would spread through the building within hours. That's life. People share stories of failure faster than they learn from them. Her phone buzzed. A new message flashed across the screen. "This is Richard Hale, the investor from earlier. If you're willing, meet me at Aurora Cafe, 5th Avenue, 3 p.m. today. I want to hear your full idea, this time without interruptions." Emily reread the message, her heart pounding like a drum. Richard Hale, a name she had heard, but never imagined speaking to directly. A veteran investor known for being ruthless, yet celebrated for bold decisions. Rumour had it he could smell opportunity even in ashes. Her lips pressed together, a smile tugging at the corners, half joy, half dread. This could be her golden chance, or a trap, but one thing was certain. Emily couldn't afford to miss it. She typed back simply, "I'll be there." And as she slipped her phone into her bag, a soft laugh escaped her lips. Maybe, just maybe, today wasn't such a terrible day after all. That afternoon, Emily's tiny apartment turned into a battlefield. On the couch lay the only 3 outfits she owned that could pass as semi-professional. A plain black dress, a worn-out suit from her secretary days, and a white blouse so washed out it was practically see-through. Emily stood with her hands on her hips, staring at them like weapons laid out for a life-or-death duel. "Which one looks better?" she asked Ben, who was munching cereal while watching cartoons. Ben looked up, nodded seriously, and said, "Wear the one that makes you look like a superhero." Emily burst out laughing. A superhero, right, but the mirror reflected someone else. A woman with dark circles under her eyes, hair crying out for a salon, and hands trembling under the weight of pressure. Still, she knew. It wasn't the clothes that would convince Richard Hale. It was the fire in her eyes and the conviction in her voice. In the end, Emily chose the simple black dress, pairing it with a clean but old coat. She tied her hair neatly, dabbed on cheap lipstick just enough to brighten her face. Before she could leave, Ben ran up and hugged her tightly, whispering, "You're my superhero. Go win." Emily's heart clenched. The fatigue melted away in that small embrace. She smiled, kissing his forehead. "I'll do my best." Outside, the evening sky glowed orange as the city rushed on, oblivious to the fact that one small meeting could change 2 lives forever. Emily hurried along, her cheap heels clattering against the pavement, nerves tangled inside her. She didn't know what Richard Hale truly wanted. A worthy idea, a test, or just an excuse to see whether this single mom was worth his attention. But she knew one thing. If this was her only chance, she would not let it slip away. Aurora Cafe sat on a quiet corner, its wide glass windows catching the golden glow of the evening sun. This wasn't the kind of place Emily usually visited. It oozed sophistication, the kind that made her feel like she had walked onto a movie set. The smell of roasted coffee beans filled the air, mingling with soft jazz music, creating an atmosphere both warm and intimidating. Emily took a deep breath and stepped inside. The patrons were well dressed, speaking in hushed tones. Glancing briefly at her, a woman in a plain black dress, slightly worn heels, hair neatly tied but unable to hide her nerves. In the far corner sat Richard Hale. He wasn't what Emily had pictured. No arrogant shark in a flashy suit, no $1,000,000 watch glinting under the lights. Instead, he wore a simple white shirt, a light grey jacket, his posture upright but relaxed. When his eyes met hers, there was no trace of condescension, only curiosity and something warmer. "Thank you for coming," Richard said, his voice calm and steady. Emily nodded, smiling faintly. "Thank you for giving me a second chance. Not many people would." Richard raised a brow, a spark of wit in his gaze. Actually, I don't believe in second chances. I believe in recognizing others' mistakes the first time and turning them into opportunities for myself. Emily couldn't help but laugh. That sounds terrifying and fascinating. They sat down. A server came by. Richard ordered a black coffee, while Emily nervously chose a cappuccino, the cheapest thing on the menu that still sounded classy. Unlike the suffocating boardroom, this place allowed Emily to breathe. Bit by bit, her worries slipped away. Richard didn't interrupt, didn't laugh. He listened intently, sometimes nodding, sometimes asking sharp questions, but never mocking. And then, as Emily grew animated describing how her platform could save countless small businesses, she realized Richard's eyes weren't just following her words. He was studying her, discovering her. For a moment, her heart skipped, powerful and unfamiliar, forcing her to lower her gaze into her cappuccino to hide it. The meeting lasted longer than Emily expected. Page after page from her worn-out briefcase spread across the polished wooden table. Every number, every idea, she explained with such passion that even she was surprised by the confidence in her own voice. Richard not only listened but took careful notes, occasionally asking questions that made her sweat yet shine, because it was clear he was taking her seriously. As the cafe lights softened into golden evening hues, Richard leaned back in his chair, studying Emily with an unreadable expression. He let the silence stretch, leaving her heart dangling in suspense. "You know," he said slowly, "your idea isn't perfect. It needs work, funding, a team, but—" He paused, eyes flickering with a spark. "What interests me isn't just the idea. It's you, a woman who didn't back down, even when the whole room was against her. I invest in people first, numbers second. And I think, Emily, you have something those men in suits don't." Emily froze. His words pierced the armor she had held all day. Her chest burned. Not just with hope for investment, but from the way he looked at her, as though she were an equal, a partner, someone worthy. She laughed softly, half disbelieving. "You make it sound like I just passed some sort of exam." Richard's lips curved into a faint smile. "Maybe you did, but don't forget, Emily. Sometimes the hardest test is standing tall when the world wants nothing more than to see you fall." A brief silence lingered, their eyes holding longer than necessary. Emily quickly looked down, sipping her cappuccino to mask her unease. Richard simply smiled, saying nothing more. The meeting ended with a firm handshake. "We'll be seeing each other again soon," he said. On her way home, lost in the rush of the city, Emily brushed her fingers lightly over her palm, where his warmth still lingered, and in her chest, a dangerous yet thrilling thought bloomed. Perhaps beyond a business deal, she had just opened the door to something deeper. The next morning, Emily woke with a strange feeling, part excitement, part dread. Sunlight poured into the small apartment, but for the first time in months, it didn't remind her of unpaid bills or endless exhaustion. Only one thought pulsed in her mind. I might finally have a real chance. Her phone buzzed. An email from Richard Hale appeared. "Emily, I've thought a lot about yesterday. I want you to prepare a more detailed plan and come to my office this afternoon. We'll discuss a serious partnership." Emily's heart nearly burst. She dropped into a chair, holding her head, laughing and crying at once. Ben stumbled out, still sleepy-eyed. "What's wrong, Mum? Did you win?" She hugged him tightly. "Not yet, but I just might have the chance to." All morning she worked furiously. The cramped apartment turned into a war zone of papers, her old laptop wheezing like it might explode. Her fingers ached, her eyes blurred, yet her heart surged with energy. By afternoon she stood before Richard's office building. It wasn't flashy like the corporate towers she knew, but warm, refined. Stepping inside, Emily felt an odd difference, as if this wasn't just a place for numbers, but a place that believed in people. Richard was already waiting in a private meeting room. When she entered, he rose to shake her hand, his eyes warm but resolute. "I'm glad you came, Emily. Today, we're no longer an investor and a pitch. Today, we speak as partners." The word struck her. Partners. It rang like a promise. For the first time, she felt she wasn't an outsider looking in. She was stepping onto the board with the players themselves. And strangely, when his gaze lingered on her face for a heartbeat too long, Emily realized perhaps this wasn't just the start of a business venture, but the beginning of something deeper. On the table lay Emily's carefully prepared plan, sheets filled with charts, notes, and scribbles from endless last-minute revisions. Richard picked up each page, reading with sharp concentration. Every time he tapped his pen lightly against the table, Emily's heart skipped, as if she were being graded on the spot. "You did all of this by yourself in 6 months?" he asked, voice a blend of surprise and severity. Emily nodded, steadying her voice. "I don't have a team, or capital, but I do have drive, and I believe drive strong enough can make up for many things in the early stages." Richard's lips curved faintly. Drive is necessary, but drive doesn't pay server bills. Still, he set the plan down, leaning back. "I've never seen anyone defend their idea with eyes like that. You're not just trying to make money, are you?" Emily hesitated, then answered slowly but firmly. "No, I want to create opportunity. For the small shops being crushed because they can't keep up with the giants. And for my son, to show him that even his mum, the one they laughed at, could still stand tall and make something happen." For a moment, Richard was silent. His eyes softened, losing the sharp edge of an investor. Between them, the atmosphere shifted. Not an interrogation, but a moment of connection. "You know, Emily," Richard said quietly, "I've seen hundreds of entrepreneurs. Most of them think only of profit, but you remind me that sometimes a great idea begins with a genuine heart." Emily's cheeks flushed. She bent her head, pretending to rearrange her papers, hiding the strange flutter inside her chest. God, he's talking about business. But why does it feel like something more? The atmosphere in the private meeting room was entirely different now. Gone was the icy tension of yesterday's boardroom. In its place lingered a heavy, anxious anticipation. Emily sat upright, her hands clenched tightly in her lap, eyes following Richard's every move. He slowly folded the business plan and set it aside. The gesture made Emily hold her breath. A dozen scenarios rushed through her mind. Would he reject her? Give her another small chance? Or dismiss her altogether with a cold laugh? Richard stayed silent for a few seconds, then let out a sigh, not of disappointment, but of decision. "Emily," he said, his voice deep and steady, "I want to invest in this idea, not just a token few thousand, but real capital, enough to make it happen. But I have one condition. You must be the one to lead the project. I don't invest in ideas, I invest in people. I invest in you!" The words jolted through Emily like electricity. Her eyes widened, her voice stumbled. You really believe I can do it?" Richard leaned forward, his gaze firm yet gentle. "If I didn't, I wouldn't be sitting here. I see in you something most don't have, resilience. And I believe a venture only succeeds when led by a heart that refuses to break." Emily's eyes burned with tears she fought to hold back. This wasn't just an opportunity. It was the validation she had longed for. For a fleeting moment, as their eyes locked, the room fell into a hush. Richard smiled faintly. "So, partner?" Emily laughed softly, trembling with joy, and reached out her hand. "Deal." And in that handshake, Emily knew a new chapter of her life had truly begun. Not just one of business, but of a deeper bond waiting to be named. The small apartment lit up as Emily stepped through the door. Ben sat cross-legged on the floor, building a castle out of worn Lego blocks. The moment he heard the door, he looked up, his eyes sparkling as if his child's intuition already knew something important had happened. "Mom, how was it? Did they laugh at you again?" Ben dashed over and clung to her leg. Emily bent down, wrapping her arms around him, laughter breaking through her tears. "No, they didn't laugh this time. And guess what? I found someone who believes in me. We're about to start something new." Ben's eyes grew wide. "So that means you won, right?" Emily stroked his hair, smiling. "Not quite won yet, but I've got a teammate now. And when you have a teammate, the chances of winning go way up." The boy nodded seriously, then whispered, "I knew it. You're my superhero." Hearing that, Emily hugged him tighter, tears falling into his messy hair. She had never felt stronger. All the exhaustion, the humiliation from yesterday's boardroom, seemed to dissolve, leaving only a growing faith in her heart. That night, after Ben had fallen asleep, Emily sat by the window, staring at the city lights flickering in the distance. Richard's image returned to her mind, his eyes, his smile, his firm handshake, and a quiet voice inside whispered, "This isn't just business. This might be the beginning of something more." On her first day stepping into Richard's office as a partner, Emily's heart was both excited and heavy. The office wasn't huge, but it was elegant and orderly. Every bookshelf, every painting reflecting the discipline of a man who knew exactly what he wanted. Richard personally introduced her to a small team. They looked at Emily with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. In the business world, it was unheard of. A single mom, with no flashy degrees, being trusted by Richard Hale, the toughest investor, to lead the core of a new venture. A young woman whispered to a colleague, but Emily caught it clearly. Probably just another doomed experiment. Don't know what Hale is thinking. Her chest tightened, but she swallowed it down, keeping a calm smile. She was used to whispers like that, had been for years, and this time she was determined to prove them wrong. In the meeting room, Richard placed a thick folder in front of her. This is the first step. I want you to lead this team and analyze the market within 2 weeks. Without hard data, an idea remains just a dream. Emily stared at the heavy stack of papers, feeling the weight of the world pressing down. She inhaled deeply and nodded. I'll get it done. Richard's faint smile carried both trust and something warmer. I don't expect perfection. I expect persistence. In that moment, amid all the pressure, Emily realized she was no longer alone, and perhaps an invisible thread was beginning to bind her and Richard together. Not just as partners, but as something harder to name. On her first day working with the team, Emily immediately sensed it. No one really respected her. They shook hands politely, nodded, but their eyes told a different story. The eyes of people waiting for her to stumble. When she outlined her initial plan for market analysis, a slick-haired young man cut her off. Sorry, but have you ever led a research team before? This isn't the kind of job an amateur can handle. The room went silent. A few exchanged glances, lips twitching in faint smirks. Heat rose to Emily's cheeks, but instead of retreating, she replied calmly, No, I've never managed a team, but I've managed an entire life with nothing but 2 hands. And trust me, when you're raising a child on minimum wage, your management and creativity skills grow faster than any MBA program could teach. No one laughed this time. Some frowned, others looked surprised. Yet the doubt still lingered thick in the air. At lunch, while the team went out, Emily stayed behind with the thick stack of files, struggling to map out responsibilities. She knew they were testing her, to see if she'd break within days. And honestly, part of her wanted to. But then Richard appeared unexpectedly, holding a cup of coffee. He set it down in front of her, offering only a faint smile. I know they doubt you. That's normal. But Emily, don't let the noise outside drown out the voice inside your heart. Just one sentence. But it made Emily's eyes sting. She nodded softly. Thank you. Richard said no more, just tapped his fingers lightly on the table like a silent encouragement before leaving. Emily watched him go, her chest tightening with a confusing mix of gratitude and something deeper. She whispered to herself, Fine. They want to see me fail? Then I'll show them the opposite. The first 2 days passed like an uphill battle. The young team members exchanged skeptical glances, leaving Emily to drown in piles of data. They worked as if simply observing, waiting for her to collapse, but Emily didn't. On the second night, long after everyone had gone, she stayed in the office, hunched over her old laptop, eyes bloodshot as she wrestled with numbers. She knew they underestimated her. And there was only one way to break that prejudice. Turn her idea into hard, undeniable data. By the third day, in the team meeting, Emily laid her first report on the table. Her voice was steady. I've analysed 200 small shops in this district. 70% of them are losing money simply because they lack tools to connect with online customers. And these aren't theories. This is real data. The room fell silent. The bold numbers on the page landed like a slap against their doubts. The slick-haired young man, the one who mocked her earlier, frowned as he flipped through the report again and again, finding no flaw to sneer at. A young woman who had been quietly observing finally spoke. These numbers, they're impressive. How did you manage to gather them so quickly? Emily's eyes lit up with a smile. I went straight to the shops, knocked on doors and asked. When people see you genuinely care, they're willing to share their stories. Data doesn't just live in spreadsheets, it breathes out there. A subtle but undeniable shift spread across the room. Not everyone believed her yet, but at least they were listening. From the end of the table, Richard watched the entire exchange. He didn't intervene, only observed, his eyes glimmering with pride. And when Emily caught that look, she realized, for the first time, she wasn't fighting this battle alone. By the end of the first week, the atmosphere in the team had shifted. Instead of skeptical stares, some members began asking Emily for input. The young woman even volunteered to join Emily on surveys, her face showing genuine admiration. Even the slick-haired man, though still too proud to admit it, had stopped looking for excuses to mock her. Emily sat in the meeting room, watching the team animatedly discuss her latest report. Pride swelled in her chest. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like an outsider. She belonged at the table. When the meeting ended, Richard approached, resting a hand lightly on the back of her chair, leaning close to say softly, "You've done better than I expected. They're beginning to see what I saw in you from day one." Her heart skipped at his words. She smiled, murmuring, "Thank you for believing in me when no one else would." Richard seemed about to say more, but just then, the door swung open. A middle-aged man in an expensive suit strode in, his expression cold. The team members rose quickly to greet him. Emily froze, unsure of what was happening. Richard's jaw tightened. "What are you doing here, Martin?" The man, Martin, let out a mocking laugh. "I'm here to remind you that not every investment is cleared by Hale Group's board, and this one looks like nothing more than recklessness." His eyes swept over Emily, sharp as a blade. "A single mom with no experience? This is the person you're betting millions on?" The room fell silent. Every eye turned to Emily, no longer just curious, but worried. Richard's jaw clenched, but Emily knew. A new trial, far greater than yesterday's ridicule, had just begun. The air in the meeting room was heavy as lead. Martin stood with arms crossed, the arrogance of a man convinced he was always right. His eyes swept over Emily again, as if trying to crush her with a glance. "Richard," Martin said coldly, "you've invested in hundreds of deals, but this time you're gambling your reputation. An immature idea, a woman with no management experience, no business degree. You call this strategy?" Emily sat frozen, heat rushing to her face. She wanted to leap up and argue, but under the table Richard's hand brushed hers lightly. A silent reminder. "Stay calm. Let me handle this." Richard rose slowly, his gaze sharp as steel on Martin. "You're partly right. Emily doesn't have an MBA or a glittering record to brag about. But that's exactly why she sees what our so-called business geniuses miss. She brings the perspective of someone living in reality, where millions of small shops are struggling every day. That's not a weakness. That's strength." Martin gave a dry laugh, dripping with disdain. "Strength? You call an unemployed single mom strength?" The room fell still. Some staff shifted uncomfortably. Emily clenched her fists, trembling, then drew a deep breath, stood tall, and spoke, her voice ringing clear. "Yes, I'm a single mum. Yes, I was unemployed. But that gave me a drive you'll never understand. When you've always had a board, a corporation, a fortune behind you, you don't know what it's like to choose between buying dinner for your child or paying the electric bill. I understand those small shops out there because I've lived like them. And that's exactly why I know how to help them survive." Her words struck like a hammer against Martin's arrogance. Silence gripped the room. Some employees couldn't hide their admiration. Richard's eyes glimmered with pride, and something warmer Emily hadn't seen before. Martin narrowed his eyes, displeased at being cornered in front of everyone. His voice was low and sharp. "We'll see how long you last." Then he turned and stormed out, leaving behind a tense but strangely triumphant air. Emily stood there, heart pounding, realizing, this time, she wasn't the one being laughed at. She had just proved herself. After Martin stormed out, the room still hummed with the tension of a storm just past. But this time, instead of silence and avoidance, the eyes that turned to Emily carried something different. Respect. The young woman smiled faintly, breaking the quiet first. "Emily, I think you just spoke for so many people out there. Honestly, I've never seen anyone stand up to Mr. Martin like that." Even the slick-haired young man who once mocked her cleared his throat. Maybe I judged you too quickly." He didn't meet her eyes, but his awkwardness was the closest thing to an apology he could manage. Emily nodded softly, her heart warming. For the first time, she felt she wasn't just standing before them, she was truly part of the team. At the head of the table, Richard remained seated, his gaze steady on her. When the others had left, he approached, his voice low but sincere. "Emily, You just did what many seasoned entrepreneurs can't, stood tall when humiliated in public. That's why I believe in you. Emily smiled, her eyes glistening. I only said what I truly believe, and maybe because I had nothing left to lose but that belief. Richard's eyes flickered, a ripple of emotion quickly masked by a calm smile. Sometimes, it's the ones who think they have nothing left to lose, who end up making the biggest changes. In that quiet moment, in the empty room, they stood facing each other, not as an investor and a struggling single mom, but as two souls who, somehow, had found a reflection of themselves in the other's eyes. On the first official day of market surveys, Emily led two young team members down a street filled with small shops, laundromats, diners, corner stores. Every brick seemed soaked with the sweat of working-class survival. An elderly shopkeeper waved her off the moment Emily introduced herself. Forget it, dear. We've got enough to worry about just keeping the lights on. All this tech talk, people come, make promises, and leave. Emily patiently explained, showed real examples, even pulled up a demo on her tablet. But the woman's wary eyes didn't change. The two staff members exchanged glances, clearly thinking Emily was wasting her breath. Later that afternoon, at a tiny diner, the owner listened and then burst out laughing. Sweetheart, your idea sounds great, but who's paying for it? I can't even cover this month's rent. Silence. Once again, her own teammates' skeptical eyes burned into her. Emily's chest tightened, but she refused to quit. I understand, sir, she said slowly but firmly. But that's exactly why you need this. Because you're in debt. Because you need more customers. People won't buy a lofty dream, but they will buy a chance to survive. And my idea is here so shops like yours don't disappear. The man fell quiet, his gaze wavering. He didn't agree, but he didn't laugh either. For Emily, that was a small victory. On the way back, one of the once doubtful teammates murmured, Maybe, you're right. I never thought about it from their perspective before. Emily smiled, exhausted, but encouraged. She knew this journey wouldn't be easy, but bit by bit, she was pulling others into her belief. Meanwhile, far away, Richard waited for the team's report. What Emily didn't know was that he had sent someone to quietly follow their progress. Not out of doubt, but to ensure she wouldn't fight this battle alone. By the time Emily returned to the office, night had already fallen. Exhausted, she dropped her folder onto the desk, just as Richard walked in. Unlike his usual stern demeanor, he carried 2 cups of hot coffee. Handing one to her, I heard you managed to shut a few people up today. Emily laughed, her voice hoarse from hours of talking. Not exactly. They're not convinced yet, but at least they're starting to listen. Richard pulled out a chair and sat across from her, his eyes steady. That's the turning point. Trust doesn't come all at once. It's built moment by moment, like today. He paused, then added more slowly. Do you know why I chose you, Emily? Not because of the idea. I get hundreds of those every week. I chose you because you don't just persuade with numbers. You reach people's hearts. Emily froze, her heart pounding, eyes stinging with emotion she tried to hide behind a faint smile. You're making me feel like I matter more than the project itself. Richard held her gaze, warm but unreadable. Maybe you do. For a moment, the room fell into an unusual hush. Outside the window, city lights flickered, as if witnessing something new beginning. Emily quickly bent her head to shuffle papers, avoiding his eyes, but a smile lingered on her lips. Richard tapped the table lightly, then rose. Get some rest, Emily. Tomorrow will bring even bigger challenges. When the door closed behind him, Emily held the coffee cup tight, her heart stirring with a strange mix of fear, warmth, and anticipation. That morning, as Emily entered the office, she sensed something was wrong. Staff murmured in corners, clutching financial newspapers with bold headlines. Hale Group's new startup questioned, a reckless gamble. Emily's heart sank. Right on the front page, her name and project were dissected. The article, leaked by Martin, described her as an inexperienced single mum receiving undeserved favoritism. The words cut like knives. Don't let it shake you. Richard's voice came from behind. He entered, his expression colder than usual. He had clearly read the article too, but instead of panic, he offered reassurance. Headlines can twist the truth. Only results can answer. Emily nodded, though her insides trembled. She knew Martin's goal wasn't just to sabotage the project, it was to break her faith in herself. Later that day, during a meeting, several financial board members arrived. One balding man spoke sharply. "If this company continues pouring money into an idea with no proven profit, we will pull our funding." "This is not a game." The room froze. Emily sat with clenched fists, realizing this was a critical moment. If they pulled out, everything would collapse before it began. Richard glanced at her, his eyes asking, "Are you ready to stand up?" Emily drew a deep breath and rose, her voice steady as it carried across the room. "You may see me as a gamble, but remember, every giant corporation started as a gamble. The difference is, I'm not just betting on myself, I'm betting on thousands of small shops struggling out there. And I believe, if Hale Group doesn't have the courage to back that truth, someone else will." Silence. The skeptical eyes wavered. Richard pressed his lips together, pride flickering in his gaze. And in that moment, Emily realized she wasn't just asking for a chance anymore. She was demanding the right to be believed, for herself and for all those voices the world ignored. The meeting ended under a heavy cloud. Some board members left with icy expressions, whispering among themselves, clearly unconvinced. Others hesitated, their eyes wavering as they glanced at Emily. Martin appeared at the doorway, as if waiting on purpose. He smirked. "Impressive. But I don't believe a few fiery words will hold investors in place. Emily, you might dazzle them for minutes, but to actually run a project, we'll see soon enough." Emily pressed her lips together, silent. This time she didn't feel fear. Instead, her eyes gleamed with a resolve that made Martin pause for a beat. When he left, Richard stepped closer, his voice deep but warm. "He'll keep trying to sabotage this. But Emily, remember this, we're not walking the easy road. And because it's hard, if we succeed, it'll be worth 10 times more." Emily looked at him, her eyes burning from holding back all day. The words slipped out before she could stop them. "Do you ever regret choosing me?" Richard froze, then shook his head, gaze so steady it made her heart tremble. "No. If there's one thing I've been certain of from the start, it's this choice." A long pause. Emily lowered her head, smiling faintly, embarrassed, yet moved. "You know, I'm not used to anyone being on my side." Richard leaned slightly, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Then get used to it. Because I am." Simple words, but they felt like a vow. And in that moment, in the cold hallway of the building, Emily's heart warmed in a way she hadn't felt in years. For the first time, she believed that no matter how stormy the road ahead, she wouldn't have to walk it alone. After days of preparation, Emily's team finally launched their first trial, a platform connecting local shops to nearby customers. They selected 10 small stores as pilot partners. On the first day, Emily's nerves were taut like she was awaiting exam results. She and her staff visited each shop, guiding owners through the system. Many were clumsy at first, but when the first orders came through, their faces lit up. Emily smiled, her heart soaring. "This is it. This is the proof I need." But the joy was short-lived. By afternoon, messages flooded in. The system slowed, orders froze. One shop's interface even crashed during peak hours. Back at the office, chaos erupted. One staffer panicked. "If customers start complaining, it's over. They'll write this project off as a joke." Emily's chest sank. All eyes turned to her. Not in doubt this time, but in expectation of leadership. She drew a deep breath, steadying the panic in her chest. "All right, we're not letting a glitch destroy everything. Split up. Tech team handles the bugs. Another team calls every shop to apologize and guide them through a workaround. We're not just selling technology, we're selling trust. And if trust wavers, we hold it with our attitude." Silence hung for a moment. Then the room bustled into motion. That night, Emily and a few stayed past midnight, hammering keyboards, answering phones, even running personally to a shop to apologize and fix the issue. Exhaustion weighed heavy, but she didn't quit. Near midnight, Richard arrived carrying hot food boxes. He set them down, his tone firm yet gentle. "No one said building a company was easy, but if you survive tonight, then you'll truly be a team." Emily looked at him, and in that moment her fatigue eased. She knew she wasn't fighting just for herself anymore, but for everyone who had chosen to believe in her. Dawn approached. The office still glowed with light, Desks littered with food boxes, cold coffee cups, and scattered papers. Emily leaned back in her chair, eyes burning but her heart filled with something strange. She hadn't broken. Her phone buzzed. A message from one of the pilot shops. "Thank you for not abandoning us. Customers are coming back. We believe in you." Emily clutched the phone, tears pricking her eyes. Then more messages followed. Restored orders, customer praise for their support. The all-night battle had paid off. The team erupted in applause, some hugging, some even crying from exhaustion and relief. The slick-haired young man who once mocked her stepped forward, offering his hand, voice trembling. I'm sorry. I never thought a single mum could lead us through a storm like this." Emily smiled, gripping his hand firmly. "Don't apologize. Just remember this moment, that we did it." From behind, Richard watched, his eyes softening. When the team dispersed to rest, he approached Emily, handing her a cup of warm water. "You know," he said slowly, "I've been through countless projects, seen many teams, but never have I seen someone give others strength the way you just did." Emily gave a tired but warm smile. "I didn't do anything. I just didn't want anyone to feel abandoned, the way I once did." Richard looked at her, his gaze lingering longer than usual. Outside, the city awakened under the rising sun. "That's what makes you different," he said, his voice low, almost like a confession. Emily turned, meeting his eyes. Her heart fluttered, not only from the small victory of the project, but from the presence of the man beside her, steady and quietly strong in a way she had never known. Softly, almost to herself, she whispered, "Maybe this is just the beginning." After the small victory of surviving the all-night crisis, Emily and her team felt stronger, their confidence shining brighter than ever. But the joy didn't last long. Just days later, shocking news broke. A rival tech company suddenly announced a product almost identical to Emily's project. Only theirs appeared more polished, heavily marketed and backed by vast funding. In an interview, the rival CEO sneered, "Immature ideas, if not properly managed, are nothing but a waste of time and money. The market needs real players, not naive dreams." Emily read the words, her chest tightening. This wasn't coincidence. Someone had leaked their project, and one name burned in her mind, Martin. An emergency meeting was called. A staffer spoke nervously. "If they capture the market first, we'll lose everything. Small shops will choose them for stability and brand power." Emily sat frozen, cold sweat trickling down her back. Everything she had built, every bit of newfound trust, was at risk of being swallowed whole. Richard, usually calm, slammed his hand on the table. "Martin's gone too far. He leaked information and let competitors ambush us. But if he thinks this is the end, he's dead wrong." He turned to Emily, eyes blazing with resolve. "We need to move faster, bolder. Emily, are you ready to bring this project into the spotlight, even if it's not perfect, to prove we are the true pioneers?" The room fell silent, all eyes on her. Emily swallowed hard, her heart pounding. This could be the biggest gamble of her life. But then she raised her head, her voice firm and clear. "If this is a battle, then I'm not running. We'll launch. And this time, they'll learn what it means to underestimate a single mom." The plan was approved in under an hour. Instead of waiting months for stability, Emily and Richard decided to launch a public beta within 2 weeks. The news hit the team like a bomb. Panic broke out. "We're not ready. If the system fails, customers will leave forever." Emily stood before them, her eyes resolute. "Yes, the risk is huge. But if we hesitate, the competition will swallow the entire market. The only thing that makes us different is the heart of this project, the real connection with small shops. If we show them we're brave enough to step out first, they'll choose to trust us, not the giants." The room fell silent. One by one, heads nodded. They weren't just following an idea. They were following Emily's conviction. The following days turned the office into a whirlwind. Sleepless nights, keyboards clattering, endless testing and bug fixes. Emily never left her desk, hair tied hastily, eyes ringed with exhaustion, yet glowing whenever a solution clicked. One late evening, long after the others had gone, Richard entered with a cup of hot tea. He set it on her desk, speaking softly. "You don't have to carry this all alone. This isn't Emily's idea anymore. It's ours, the team's and mine." Emily looked up into his eyes. For a fleeting moment, her exhaustion melted, replaced by warmth spreading through her chest. "Thank you, Richard." she whispered. Without you, I don't know how many times I would have fallen. Richard smiled faintly, but there was something deeper behind it, more than encouragement. He said nothing else, just stood by her side in silence, steady as a shoulder she could lean on. Outside, Martin was surely waiting for them to fail, but inside that brightly lit room, Emily knew she would fight to the end. The beta launch day arrived faster than Emily expected. The office was thick with tension, everyone holding their breath. At 9 a.m., the system officially went live. In the first 10 minutes, the order counter jumped rapidly. The team erupted in cheers. Emily felt her heart lift, until the first error message flashed, "Server overload." The room froze. A staffer shouted, "Customers are complaining on social media. If bad news spreads, we're finished on day one." Emily rushed to the tech desk, voice sharp. "Switch to backup mode. Strip features, keep it as simple as possible. What matters isn't completeness, it's stability." The team scrambled to comply. Minutes dragged like hours. Sweat soaked through Emily's back, as every number on the screen felt like a blade over her head. Then, after nearly an hour of struggle, the system steadied. Orders resumed flowing smoothly. A shout rang from the back. "Customers are praising us online. They say even with issues, our support reacted fast and cared. They said they trust us more than the other company." Emily froze, her hands trembling. Those small words of praise were like cool water pouring into her soul. Tears welled, this time not from failure, but from a real victory. Richard stepped close, murmuring, "See, Emily, people don't need perfection. They need a reason to believe, and you just gave them one." Emily looked up into his eyes glimmering with a faith no one had ever given her before. Her heart pounded wildly, filled with happiness and a trembling new feeling she dared not name. Somewhere outside, Martin was surely fuming that his ambush had failed. But inside this glowing office, Emily knew she had claimed her first true victory and taken the first step into a bond that could never be undone. The joy of the beta launch hadn't even settled when a new storm hit. Just 2 days later, a lengthy exposé appeared on the city's biggest financial site, titled Hale Group's Project, Genuine Innovation or Cheap PR Stunt. Inside, Emily's personal life was dragged out, her debts, her years as a janitor, even being fired from past jobs. Details were twisted, turning her from an image of resilience into someone untrustworthy. Emily froze as she read each line. Scars she had buried were now displayed for all to see. Her phone buzzed endlessly. Messages, comments, even cruel insults from strangers. At the office, some staff whispered anxiously, "If public opinion turns against us, no matter how good the system is, no one will want to work with us." Richard's grip tightened on the newspaper, fury burning in his eyes. Martin, it has to be him. This isn't business competition anymore. It's filth. Emily sat silently, her hands trembling. She wanted to vanish, to retreat to her tiny apartment where no one knew her name. But then Ben's voice echoed in her mind. His eyes when he once said, "You're my superhero." She inhaled deeply, lifted her head, and her eyes blazed anew. "If they want to use my past as a weapon, then I'll turn it into proof. I'll show the world that, because I fell, I know the value of standing up. And if anyone thinks I should be ashamed, then watch me turn that shame into strength." The room fell silent. Then came the sound of applause. Richard's. His eyes shone with pride and warmth. "That's the Emily I chose." Outside, Martin was likely smirking at his vicious move, but he didn't know he had pushed Emily not into ruin, but into ignition. She was no longer afraid of her past, ready to wield pain as her sharpest weapon. The exposé on Emily's past spread across social media. Hateful comments poured in, turning her into a public joke. In the public eye, Hale Group's project teetered on collapse. But instead of hiding, Emily made a bold decision to hold a press conference. When she announced it at the office, everyone was stunned. A staffer blurted, "Are you sure?" "The press will tear you apart," Emily replied calmly. "They already have. Now it's time I tell that story my way." On the day of the press conference, the hall was packed. Camera flashes blazed. In the front row, Martin sat with arms crossed, lips curled in anticipation of watching Emily self-destruct. Emily stepped to the podium. She wore the same simple black dress she had worn the first time she met Richard. Her voice wavered at first, then grew stronger. "Yes, I was a janitor. Yes, I was fired. I drowned in debt. I don't deny any of it, but those days taught me to stand up. They taught me that a person's worth isn't measured by how many times they fall, but by how many times they rise. The room hushed. Emily continued, her voice ringing like a vow. Today, I'm not here to hide my past. I'm here to turn it into strength. And I want every small shop out there, every person struggling to survive, to know if a single mom once laughed out of the room can stand here today, then so can you. Applause broke from the back, swelling across the hall. Cameras panned to faces touched with emotion. In the front row, Martin scowled, his face darkening. From the sidelines, Richard watched Emily intently. He knew this moment wasn't just saving a project. It was turning her into a symbol. And inside him, belief mingled with something deeper, something he no longer wanted to keep hidden. Within hours of the press conference, social media exploded. Hashtags like Single Mom Rise and Stand Up Emily flooded forums. Instead of ridicule, people shared her story as inspiration. Small shops that had once hesitated now sent messages of support. Many signing up for the platform simply because they wanted to stand with the woman who dared to stand up. Meanwhile, at Martin's office, the air reeked of rage. He slammed a newspaper onto the table. She turned a smear into a victory. Unacceptable! Martin immediately launched a counterattack, paying media outlets to publish critical pieces, spreading rumors that Emily's platform was unsafe and prone to leaking customer data. The rumors spread quickly, stirring fear. Exhausted, Emily sat in her office, staring at screens filled with negativity. A flicker of despair passed over her until Richard entered. He gently placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice firm. Don't let him control the story. Emily, the public has already chosen you. These rumors are just the death throes of a man who's losing. She looked up, her eyes glistening. But what if this time I can't hold on? If everything collapses? I'll drag down everyone who trusted me. Richard paused, then stepped closer, his voice low but more earnest than ever. Emily, I don't just believe in this project. I believe in you, and not as an investor. As a man, I believe in the woman sitting right in front of me. Emily froze, her heart pounding, cheeks burning. His words shattered the walls he had kept up for so long. In that moment, amid media storms and Martin's ruthless attacks, Emily realized there was a force greater than numbers or strategy, the trust and the feelings Richard had just laid bare. As public opinion tilted toward Emily, Martin launched his deadliest strike. One morning, headlines screamed, Hale Group sued for contract fraud, new project at risk of shutdown. The news hit like a bomb. The plaintiff, a former associate of Martin's, clearly a trap laid in advance. Investors panicked, phones at the office rang non-stop. Some pilot shops wavered, pausing cooperation. Until things are clear, Emily nearly broke. In the boardroom, she listened to grim reports, frozen funds, investors threatening to pull out, the market full of doubt. This time it wasn't rumour. It was legal, capable of burying the project. Martin appeared, timed to perfection. He strode into the boardroom, a smug smile on his lips. I told you, Emily. People like you don't belong here. You don't have the strength. You don't have the cold blood. And now, the game is over. Emily trembled, but Richard's eyes blazed. He slammed the table and stood tall. No, Martin. The game ends only when we give up. And Emily is not the kind to give up. He turned to her, voice fierce, igniting her spirit. Emily, do the one thing no one expects. Don't let him define you. Show the world the truth on your terms. All eyes turned to Emily. Her heart pounded, fists clenched, memories surged, being laughed at, scrubbing floors with cracked hands, crying in the dark. And then her son's eyes, Richard's words. She drew a deep breath, lifted her head, and her voice thundered. Martin's right about one thing. I'm not cold-blooded. But that's exactly why I won't lose my heart. And that's something you'll never have. The room erupted. Emily's declaration cracked through the air like a storm. Martin faltered, his smug grin shattering. The battle had reached its peak. Not just about technology or funding anymore, but about honor, trust, and the human heart. After the tense boardroom clash, Emily made her boldest move to release all records, data, and the full journey of the project publicly. No hiding, no excuses. In a live stream watched by millions, Emily appeared with her team. She openly shared technical failures, early setbacks, and her personal struggles. But alongside them were raw stories, small shops gaining new customers, shop owners choking up with gratitude because they finally felt seen. The reaction was overwhelming. Instead of losing faith, the public rallied. Small shops defended Emily, and customers voluntarily spread the word. The hashtag #WeChooseEmily trended worldwide. Under public pressure and transparent evidence, the investors withdrew their threats to freeze funding. The contract fraud lawsuit collapsed when proof of Martin's ties to the plaintiff surfaced. Martin fell. Images of him leaving the building in silence, dodging cameras, became the mark of a defeated man. Back at the office, while the team celebrated, Emily sat quietly in a corner, tears streaming down, not of sadness, but of victory. For the first time in her life, she had truly won, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been dismissed. Richard approached, handing her a tissue. He smiled softly. "You did it. Emily, you didn't just save a project, you changed how people see a single mum." Her voice caught. "I couldn't have done it without you." Richard's gaze held hers, unguarded for the first time. His voice low, warm and honest. "Emily, I believed in the idea at first, but what kept me from walking away was you. I've fallen in love with the strong, imperfect, wholehearted woman standing in front of me." Emily froze, her heart racing, tears turning into a trembling smile. She whispered, "Maybe. I've fallen for you too." Cheers erupted from the team around them. But in that moment, beneath the lights and laughter, it was only the two of them, seeing only each other. The story closed not just with the triumph of a project, but with an unexpected love, born from scars, resilience, and the courage to believe in one another,